Hey guys, it's Mark from Ability Links. I'm just here to talk to you today about ROCk, or the roster of care. It's an integral part of a SIL submission, and I just think it takes a little bit of a time to get a hang of, but hopefully if you stick in there, we should be able to get through this together. I'm holding your hand there in spirit. So just grab a drink. It'll take a little while, and sit back, relax, and let's dive right in. So supported independent living is help or supervision of daily tasks to help participants to live independently as possible. During a planning meeting, the participant or planner will discuss if SIL is the best option for a participant. If they're already in SIL, there's a good chance that they've already decided that SIL is necessary. The next step is for us to define what level of support is reasonable and necessary. And that comes in the form of the SIL roster of care, or ROCk as it's otherwise known, and the SIL roster of care template. So it's this one and this one. So the roster of care, it's a little bit of a changeover from the older system. It's supposed to bring a greater efficiency, flexibility, and fewer delays in approving participants' plans. A lot of the new system means that the process is a little bit more automated, makes things easier for the computer, but it can sometimes make things a little bit harder for us. Well, the SIL submission process. Participants and their nominee should be involved in the roster of care and the SIL submission process from the start. So that means setting a time to meet with participants and their families, discuss whether their support needs are being met currently, and look at what they'd like to change in the future. This means getting a bit of a timetable around what the participants' week looks like, as well as what may change during the year. This could be holidays, it could be time spent away, and to look at the other options available to participants, whether it's working in ADE or working in open employment. The options are pretty endless, and it's important to have a good support coordinator along with you through that process to work with the SIL and the participant's family to engage in co-discovery. It's a little bit of a shameless plug there as to our services. Once the ROC's been completed, it's very important for participants to meet with the provider before the ROCk is submitted, just to confirm that everything's okay and to make sure that what information's being captured actually matches with what the participant and their family are trying to convey. This ROC's then sent through to the SIL team. They'll assess it, make sure that no mistakes have been made. Then if there's any issues, they'll send it back to the provider to fix things up. So don't worry if things get messed up a little bit the first time round. You'll get an opportunity to fix it. Once the SIL team has check the submission and they're happy that there's no errors there, they'll pass that on to the planner, which allows us to then discuss SIL at the planning meeting and fight for the reasonable and necessary supports in the participant's plan. Step one in our process is to meet with the participant and their family to fill out the SIL ROCk submission template. Don't freak out. You don't have to sit with the participant's family and fill out an Excel spreadsheet. This refers to the Word document, which is in two parts. The first part looks at the profile of the SIL, so it looks at the number of staff members that are involved, and the second component looks at the participant's goals. So this is giving us an opportunity to capture capacity building options available to the participant and goals that they'd like to achieve in their home life. This could extend to activities in the community that relate to daily life, whether it be helping out with grocery shopping or going to the local pharmacy to pick up scripts, or even helping with the household meals occasionally. These capacity building opportunities sort of tie in with the agency's focus on SIL being what's called a program of support. These programs of support are supposed to be reviewed every 12 weeks to better align with participants' outcomes. So that means meeting with the participant at least once every 12 weeks, updating their goals, and then reviewing the service agreement, which gives an opportunity for the participant and the family to have a little bit more input in the SIL process and how they can be supported to live independently. These capacity building opportunities, it's worth noting, can also help to justify the ratios associated with participant supports. So make sure you're accurately capturing what skills you're passing on to residents in SIL facilities and in homes, as it could be very reasonably expected that a participant that's learning a new skill would require a higher level or a higher ratio of support. It's worth remembering as well that SIL doesn't have to be delivered in an SDA property. It can occur in a private rental, or it's case by case basis in like social housing. So it's important to look at options there that allow participants to live in like more of a community setting, and it gives us an opportunity to explore assistive technology and review what sort of supports a participant needs at home. It's very important to fill out a draft timetable. I'd start like with a 24/7 timetable outlining exactly what the participants are doing in the week. If you could do it in a half-hour blocks, that's probably most appropriate, because that lines up perfectly with the SIL ROCK submission tool. It's very important to remember as well that SIL vacancies and time spent in hospitals are not claimable. It's not considered a cost, as is considered a cost to the SIL, whereas trips to the doctor, pharmacy, or to do shopping should be recorded as their claimable activities. So make sure you're keeping a note of what time the participant's spending in the SIL and what times they're spending out. So that could be hospital appointments for surgeries, which may take place over a number of days, or maybe holidays where they're heading off with their family. So the ROC submission template's divided into 7 sections. So it's our submission guidelines, so that's an overview. The participant profile, which is worth noting that within that participant profile there's a section just at the start. Always remember to delete this. Many forget to do it. It's easy to miss because it sort of fits in with the surrounding layout of the document. So that's this little part just over here. Be sure to delete that. And don't judge my circle drawing skills. Then we've got the property profile, which is the information that relates to the staffing of the SIL, location, things along those lines. Our participant outcomes. So this is a very important part. It's worth looking at our goals and like how participants' funding is used. This is what should take sort of the most time out of the whole process. And then we've got our declaration of submissions. This is the part where the participant or the nominee signs just to confirm that they're involved in developing the ROC, and our submission exclusions, which outlines the things that aren't included in the SIL submission but are funded by either the participant or somewhere elsewhere under the NDIS, or funded through another government program. And then our attachments, which outline, which could be like incident reports, information from doctors, treating specialists that outline or assist in negotiating reasonable and necessary supports. It's probably worthwhile listing these components, as it's very easy for things to go missing. So looking at our SIL ROCK submission template, so this is still the Word document. It's important to include the provider name and number, participant number, date of birth, all the standard components you'd see on most NDIS forms. Participant support need level, that's determined by the number of interactions that are involved in supporting a participant. So you could expect like a low support needs person would have a lower ratio of support, which could be like only needing like 1 to 4, for instance, a majority of the time. They're fairly compliant, whereas standard, like a person may need a little bit more physical assistance or prompting. High is when there's usually behaviors of concern or high physical dependency involved, and complex is usually when you're looking at people requiring extremely high levels of support. So that could be due to behaviors of concern, 2 to 1 ratio, or someone that may be a little bit larger and require extra assistance to move about or to complete transfers. And when we're looking at the price limits, that should be reflective of the standard, high, or complex levels. So obviously standard and low, we're going with like our standard price rate, whereas higher intensity would relate to our high and complex participant. Now, participant goals, it's not in reference to the participant's NDIS goals. This is looking at the participant's SIL goals, so the goals that they'd like to achieve within like the SIL service. And then we've got the participant's disabilities and a list of current behaviors of concern, and a summary of the participant's current support needs. Each of these promptings are fairly sort of self-explanatory. It just helps the planner to engage in the process and to describe the level of understand the level of support that the participant needs. Just imagine this as if we're painting a picture and helping to bring everyone on side as to what's needed in the participant's life. So go into detail, reference through to incident reports if you've got them. Use pictures if you want to make things a little bit more interesting. Go crazy. And then the property profile section, that's fairly self-explanatory as well. This component just looks at how supports are being delivered, whether supports are shared with others not residing at the property. So there could be people living in close proximity with the remote monitoring for like on-call services, and looking at like any modifications that currently exist within the home, whether it be like robust or whether it's ceiling hoists, ramps, things like that, to help the planner to understand what level of support is required for a person to live safely in the home. And looking through it, the number of non-NDIS participants living in a property, that could be, it's easy sometimes to forget in certain areas, but participants aren't excluded from having non-NDIS participants living with them, and it's just another element of choice in control in action. And the NDIS really encourages flexible and innovative delivery of support, so I'm expecting that a number of new options will pop up in this space, especially in regards to ILO, which is worthwhile looking into in the future, or independent living options. This is just a quick example of a possible capacity building outcome. So as again, the agency, they love their SMART goals, so looking at things that are measurable. Then it's just looking at the submissions, completing the submission section, having the nominee and participant sign off on that, the attachments, and then we're on to our Excel document. So I just take a moment, pause the video if you want, grab another cup of coffee, because you'll probably need it at this point. This is where we start going into the Excel document. So we're finished off with the Word template now, and we're looking at the Excel. So if you look at the bottom of the Excel document, there's a number of tabs. So we're just starting at the left and working our way across to the right. Just before we start, it's worthwhile looking at the shift type definitions. So the NDIS, they don't fund crossover shifts. So that means if a shift moves from weekday daytime through to weekday evening, and whereas the price guide says that the shift delivery price is the higher rate across the whole delivery of the support, the NDIS says no to charging for crossover shifts or that higher level of support when the service delivery crosses that threshold. So it's important to make sure shifts fall within like those crossover times, so that we've got 6 AM to 8 PM as one shift, 8 PM to 12 AM as another, and looking at our hours and Saturday and Sunday to make sure that they're not crossing over into our evening and afternoon hours. So placing clear shift crossovers so that we haven't got staff members that are going over into those different time brackets. So I've got our different shift types here. So sleepovers, active overnight, our public holiday definition, and irregular supports. So the irregular supports was one component that had me stumped for a little while. It looks at the number of days per year where a participant requires an unplanned irregular SIL support. So that could be requiring higher levels of care or like more hours to assist with different activities, and the amount that's deemed reasonable and necessary in this regard, or the 16-hour days, are varied depending on the participant's classification, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail later on. So it's worth looking. We've got to look at this point and include the provider details and just the physical details of the SIL. That's it. You're still with me? You're breathing? It's good. Now we're on to the next bit. So this is where things start to get a little bit complicated. Just take your time. We'll get through it. So we've got all the participant details, provider details in. Then we've clicked across into the participant details. We're looking at just including the names and the details of the participants that are residing in the SIL and their ID. We can actually, within this one SIL tool, it acts as a global like support planner for all that are residing in the one property. So it helps us to work out what supports can be provided and what requires like a higher ratio of support. This is how the agency is trying to sort of save money in regards to the sharing of supports within SIL properties. So in this section of the guide, we're filling in our rates. So obviously, again, the price guide applies. And we can just follow through at this point and just make sure that when you're sending through your ROC that the prices match the current price guide, which changes quite regularly. So it's easy to sort of send through a submission with an outdated line item and miss a few dollars here and there, which like over the course of a plan can add up quite a bit. Now this is our lovely little paint by numbers section. So this is at the second part of the roster of care. When you're looking at the ratios in the legend, it'll start off with 1:1 and 2:1 as the standard, but if you click on any of the little tabs in the support section below, it should expand out and allow you to choose any of the tabs that's within this section here. And just make sure that the colors correspond with the level of support that's being delivered. And just remember, if you're asking for higher support ratios like 1:1 or 2:1, to have justification for that. Now it's just important to make a note as well, when you're filling in the ratios component of the ROC, don't copy and paste. The submission tool's meant to be interactive so that when data's inputted, it should allow for an auto calculation of supports at the end. So if we copy and paste ratios in, it messes with the formula, which makes the whole ROC go a little bit rock and roll and crazy. So we want to avoid that. Be sure just to click and then change the ratio just by clicking on the box. That's all you have to do. Remember, click on the box. It's a paint by numbers. We're not going to be just copying and pasting components in. Then looking at the afternoon and evening support shift details, we're just filling in just our standard rostered times for staff members. It's pretty self-explanatory. When there's like a crossover shift, it'll show that it'll sort of highlight that there's an issue there, and it'll ask you to go back and fix the issue. For instance, like if we've got an issue and there's a crossover shift, or like we've got a shift that goes on a little bit too long, it'll highlight those issues here like such. And like if you do have like as referenced before, if you've got a need for higher level of supports, or there's a capacity building activity that's planned to be undertaken in the SIL that requires one-on-one support, detail that here. So the hourly breakdown component of the sheet, it just gives us an opportunity to fix any errors. So if there has been a crossover shift, or we need to reduce hours, or there needs to be like an increase in the number of hours for certain components of the tool, we can manually add these hours in into the SIL tool here at step 3.2. Doesn't have to be completed if everything's okay, but just make sure you put an explanation in if you do. And just review the hours of support summary after the adjustments have been made. If everything's okay, you should get a green light for everything. It'll give you a spit out of the number of hours a week in each component. It's important at this point to make sure that we've got the right number of public holidays and irregular supports. So with the public holidays, a great tool that I love to use is working days, and it'll give us an outline of the number of public holidays, number of Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays in the week, and makes it a lot easier in support planning. So make sure that that's reflected in the public holiday component of the submission tool. Now, your regular support days, this is your 16-hour days that we spoke about at the start of the submission tutorial. So when we're looking at our different ratings for participants, these are the maximum number of irregular days per year. So we've got 15.2 for higher or complex needs, standard needs, and 10.3 for lower needs. So then it's important for us to review the SIL estimates, make sure that matches up with our external calculations. It'll give us a summary, and then it's important for us to take this summary and discuss it with the family, get their sign off, and we're done for that participant. So it's just a simple matter of choosing that participant in the drop down list, and that should provide a full ROC profile for that participant, and that's what's needed for the plan review process to proceed. So all we do at this point, once everything's signed off by the participant, the nominee, the support code's been involved in the process, everyone's happy, then we submit through to this address. Don't mind me drawing here like a madman. It's supposed to be an arrow, but send it through to sil@ndis.gov.au. And just for reference, if you need to reflect back to these slides, you can just go through, and here is all the relevant line items through to SIL. Just if you want to feeling bored and you want to cross-reference with the recent price guide and make sure that everything matches up with the pricing in the SIL ROC tool. It's worthwhile just downloading an updated ROC occasionally, as it'll be auto updated with pricing from time to time, but you'll just add that in the initial pricing component of the tool if it needs updating. And then again, here's a little bit more information on SIL being considered a program of support, as I mentioned earlier. So they've clarified that SIL is a group-based program of support in the price guide, which is mainly focused on like capacity building, and it should be reviewed every 12 weeks. So this is something worth mentioning. I see some people trip up on occasionally. price guide, the service agreement should be no longer than 12 weeks, and the participant can exit without cost after that 12-week period, subject to an agreed notice time, which is no longer than 2 weeks. Then again, we've got our reasonable and necessary decision-making process. So then just make sure that each of the support requests match up with each of these little tick boxes, and we should be right. Congratulations, guys, you made it through it.